Look at this beautiful place. All right.
Bad memories.
Cool. You guys want to tighten up more? We can move the shirt so they. You're perfect there. Yeah. Wow. When he said it was going to be at the Sacred Fire, I didn't realize it was going to really be a sacred fire. This is a super cool spot. Maybe we can just take a couple deep breaths and kind of tune into this space. I like to give thanks before I do talks, and you know, I never really know what I'm going to share, especially because we just drove 6 hours overnight to get here and just got here 20 minutes ago. But I always ask, you know, give a prayer of like, whatever I'm meant to share and whoever I'm meant to connect with, just allow that to happen. So we'll wish for that. So maybe we can put our attention on the sacred fire and all these different sacreds people have put around here, and these two beautiful trees, these other beautiful trees. Just take a deep breath together. Release. Let's take another big one. Breathe in through your nose. And release. I just ask that you guys all, whatever brought you here to hear me speak, if you know who I am, or if you just were interested in the title, or if you have nothing else better to do, thank you for being here. I just ask you come with an open heart, open mind, and if any of the ideas I share challenge you, step into that challenge, and if they inspire you, then step into that inspiration, and let's hang out and talk afterwards. Appreciate you guys. So my name's Derrick Bros. Hey guys. Y'all want to squeeze in some more closer? Can we make a little room for them? Y'all don't mind? Cool. Thank you guys for being here. So my name's Derrick Bros. I'm an independent journalist, an activist, documentary filmmaker. I do public speaking. I also perform music. And I've been on this path for about 15 years, starting out with an activist background, like on the ground, organizing protests, marches, rallies, doing all that fun stuff, but also helping build community gardens, hosting skill shares, teaching people how to make their own bread or make their own soap and things like that, using music and art as an avenue to try to reach people. My efforts over the last 15 plus years have just pretty much all been focused on trying to educate myself, and then through that using my YouTube channel and other stuff like that to educate anybody who other cares, and then also meet people who are interested in solutions. So part of my work is the journalism aspect. I write articles, I produce documentaries focused on a lot of the injustices in our world, you know, whether that's indigenous injustices, whether that's corporate or governmental injustices, or things that are sometimes labeled conspiracy theories. I explore all those realms, and my goal is always to try to, again, educate people with that knowledge, let them start their journey or contribute to their journey, and from there start having the conversation of, okay, but what do we actually do about it? You know, we can talk about the problems all day long, and I'm assuming most of this crowd that's here is, let's just use a overused word, conscious in some way and aware of the problems in the world. And if you came here, I also hope that you're somebody who might be at the point where you're ready to start thinking, what can I actually do about these things? I'm tired of just watching things get worse. What can I do to empower myself and maybe empower those around me? And so that's what we're going to focus on today. I spent quite a bit of time experimenting with this, you could say, and so the solutions and the ideas that I'm going to offer are going to come from my own path of things that nothing I'm going to share is anything that I haven't done myself, and I think that's important. I feel like it's one thing to kind of promote ideas and solutions, especially via the internet, and then in reality you live a completely different life. This is kind of common. Humans are humans like that, but I think it is important for us to lead by example, and you know, your words are more impactful if you're actually living the things that you're so-called preaching. You know, if you actually step into your principles and the things you care about and not just talk about them or dream about them or wish or hope for them to be relevant, but to actually be an embodiment of them and to live that. So we're going to talk about principles and some things like that, but I'll share a little bit more about my journey. So I started doing journalism in Activism 2009. By 2012, 2013, I started to pick up a camera and go to press conferences and confront the mayor, the police chief, and ask questions and do cop watching and all this stuff. And after a while, I realized like the media wasn't doing their job, and I probably could do it better, or at least I could try. And you know, from just sort of coming from that activist background, then I started to take the journalism really seriously, and I've written a few books. Today what we're going to focus on is coming from my recent book, which is called How to Opt Out of the Technocratic State, and you guys can all download it for free. It's on my website, at The Conscious Resist. I'm going to drop a bunch of links throughout this talk, so if anybody wants to take notes or whatever, theconsciousresistance.com/how-to. You can find a free PDF download of my book. There's a free audio book there, and I've got 2 copies left if anybody's interested. But most of what we're going to talk about today is going to come from that. And I'll share more about the book as we get to it. But my work over the years has largely focused on digital surveillance, digital privacy, digital rights. And this came because in my activism early journalism career, I was actually leaked some photos from the Houston Police Department, where I'm originally from, back in Texas. An officer within the HPD leaked another journalist, a friend of mine, pictures of the Houston Police Department holding a training session about me and the activist group that I started, which was called the Houston Freethinkers. And we were out there, being really crazy and violent, building community gardens, raising money for the homeless, protesting injustice. And so this got us under the radar of the Houston Police Department, and then about a month later, another officer confirmed this to me and actually sent me, I had a picture of cops sitting in a classroom with the Houston Freethinkers and my picture on there, and the person who sent it said, if you know Bros, let him know they're making us attend these training sessions about them and talking about them as they're this violent militant group. And I looked into them, and they don't seem to be doing anything wrong, but you should probably let him know he's under surveillance. And so when I heard that, I was like, holy shit, I'd only been doing activism for maybe 2-3 years at best. We'd made the news a couple times, but I don't think we were like doing anything super revolutionary or anything at that point yet. But nevertheless, that began my journey of, okay, what does that even mean? Like, generally, I think we kind of have an idea when we talk about surveillance, somebody listening to your phone or watching your internet traffic. But I decided, like, okay, if I'm under surveillance, if I have a criminal intelligence officer assigned to me to follow me as I'm biking around Houston, then I need to probably understand that a little bit better. So I started learning all about cell phone surveillance with tools like cell site simulators. It's this little laptop essentially that many police departments have around the country, and they can just drive around and scoop up all your data as they're driving around. I learned about heat detection technology. I learned about gait detection, where they're literally having cameras that detect the way you walk and how to track somebody that way, facial recognition, voice recognition, all these different things. And so I really dove in that, and a lot of my work since then is focused on that and how the rise of that really presents some difficulties for those of us who might care about privacy and liberty. And I would definitely say, I'm 40 myself, and I was 17 when 9/11 happened. But I definitely remember that it seemed like just 20 years ago, people cared more about privacy than they do now. Like, because we all have cell phones and people have heard of Edward Snowden, most people are like, yeah, who cares? I'm not doing anything wrong. I have nothing to hide, which I think is the wrong mentality to have, even if you have nothing to hide, which at the same time, does anybody feel like you have nothing to hide and privacy is not that big of a deal to you? It's okay if it is, I'm just curious. If you're talking to somebody next time and they say that, then say, hey, can I see your phone? And then you'll realize, like, well, wait, maybe there are some things I do want to keep private. And there's nothing wrong with that, but we kind of have stepped into a reality where, because we're all broadcasting our lives on social media, because surveillance is very ubiquitous in many different ways, and facial recognition is expanding, digital IDs, all these things, many people don't even give it a second thought. Maybe you go to the airport and now they're testing out these tablets and they say, please step in front of this and we're going to scan your face. And you don't think of, where's that going? This is called your face print, and biometric data is some of the most valuable data, and companies know that, and governments know that. So they're testing these kind of things out, and most people, we've just been acclimated to listen to authority, and if they say step here and look into this tablet, most people do it unquestionably. But there's value in saying, what we usually do, we don't even step in because we see it coming. We're like, no thank you, I'll just give you my passport, which you still have the right to do. But in the next year or two, it is going to become mandatory. And so these type of systems, I've been watching them since 2017, 2018. I wrote the book in 2019, and there are people much smarter than me, much more informed on this particular topic, warning about the rise of facial recognition. There's only one state in the U.S. that actually has any kind of law against the collection of our facial recognition data. And companies like Clearview AI have literally taken all of the social media profiles we've been posting for the last 20 years, and they created a bot that could just scrape all that data from social media, and then now they sell that data. They have the world's largest facial recognition database, because we all kind of gave it voluntarily, and they sell it to corporations who may want to just advertise to you. They sell it to cops who may want to use it to track people, and governments as well. It's one of the world's largest databases of facial recognition, and they did it completely free because we gave it all up over the years with our selfies and things like that. So my point here is that a lot of these technologies are rapidly advancing, and my message and what we're going to focus on today is not to say that let's be anti-technology. I use technology every day with my work. I don't think there's a way to quote-unquote go back. I do think there's a balance we can have of Mother Nature and technology, and how do we find that balance? And that's going to look different to each of us. You know, essentially the message is it's time for us to reevaluate and rethink our relationship with different forms of technology. For me, I'm going to opt out of the facial recognition until I can't, and then that might mean I won't fly if it becomes mandatory. You guys might have different lines in the sand, right? But it's important to start having this conversation, because otherwise the technology is rapidly evolving. Obviously AI just in the last 2-3 years is moving very quickly. These things are going to benefit our world in some ways, but they're also going to be very, very detrimental for privacy. And historically, when privacy goes, it is a lot easier for governments and other institutions to then come for liberty too. And you know, the two are very intrinsically connected. So that's what my work has been focused on, you know, navigating this world, being somebody who uses digital technology every day, but also sees, and also like I support private cryptocurrencies like Monero and things like that, but I also see how blockchain and these tools can be used in very negative ways, and I see how governments can use them to gather mass amounts of data on us. So at the end of the day, I don't know if I mentioned this, I probably should have started with this. I'm an anarchist too, so I don't really believe in government like action. Not saying you shouldn't pursue that if that fits you, but my solutions are more about people power. Like, okay, if we see this coming, I'm not going to say, all right guys, the solution is sign my petition and let's call our senators and hope they do something about it. If you feel good doing that, do it by all means. I'm not making fun of anybody. I'm just saying I've done that. I went to the city council meetings for years. I was ignored at hundreds of meetings. I sat with them, and the corruption is deep even on the local level. Maybe you might have different results, but so my solutions focus on what can we do as free, powerful, beautiful people in our own lives as individuals, but also collectively. How can we come together and start focusing on solutions and having these conversations about where the world's headed and how much of it do we want to participate in? You know, there's sort of this unspoken, unquestioned narrative that we're all living in, that people just perpetually want new technology, constantly. You know, it's like 5G, and then no, we need 6G and 7G, but I mean, is anybody really feeling like my stuff's not going quick enough? I'm not getting the reels fast enough to, you know, I need it a couple of seconds faster. But there's just this perpetual movement of technology. It's all about progress, right? And some people don't question whether progress is actually good in those terms. So again, I don't know if there's a way to just go smash some computer and it's all over and yeah, we stopped the rollout of bad technology. I don't think that's realistic. Instead, it's up to us, I believe, as empowered individuals to come together and say, okay, I'm okay with these things, I'm not willing to do this. And now how can I work with other people in my community to try to push back when possible, to opt out and avoid when possible, but also the other aspect of what we're going to talk about is building parallel systems. Since I don't believe politics is the answer, I don't believe violence is the answer, and I definitely don't believe apathy is the answer. You know, I do a lot of talks at different type of events. Some of them are more conferences, some of them are like this, out in nature with awesome people, like at Envision in Costa Rica and other festivals in California. And it always sucks that the people who are interested in the workshops, even in a conscious community, are still the minority of people. You know, there's a lot, and I'm not hating on anybody, but there's a lot of people recovering from last night, or they're only here for the music or for the drugs or for the party or whatever, and that's fine, there's space for that. But I just wish more of our conscious, awake, aware community was like, okay, we got thousands of people here. What if we came together and did one project? What if we planted some trees? I don't know. You know what I'm saying? Like, there's so much potential here. So I really hope that what we discussed today, you can take that information, that activation back to wherever home is for you, and that's, I think, how it continues to grow. A little more background and we'll talk about what I call exit and build. So my website and my work is called The Conscious Resistance. I started that in 2013 after a couple of years of doing my activism and kind of wanted a place to just share my own voice. That is both an exploration of the spiritual and the physical aspect of freedom. And the reason this is important to me, the reason a lot of our events, this is my lovely partner Miriam, by the way, and Miriam and I tour a lot and do events, and typically we'll start the event with a meditation from Miriam because we want to have that grounding, like sort of like we did just a little tune-in earlier. I think it's important. We're going to talk about a lot of like big, lofty ideas and philosophy and stuff, but we also want it to be grounded, right? We want it to be like rooted in our real-world experience and in the spiritual experience, because in my view, ultimately what we are facing as a species and on this planet, however you understand that, is a spiritual battle. Ultimately, I think that's what it really comes down to. So if we only talk about, as we're going to talk about today, here's some steps you can take in a very practical, physical world manner, but then we ignore that there's also this internal thing, what I call the internal tyrant. It's like your struggle against your own doubts, fears, insecurities, limiting beliefs. And this is something that I struggled very, very heavily with at a younger age. I actually woke up the first time in 2005 at 20 years old. I got arrested for possession of crystal meth. I'd been addicted to crystal meth for about 9 months, 10 months at that point, and I went to prison at 20 years old. And I ended up spending 19 months between 2005 and 2007, 2008. And that is where like I really chose to kind of begin this path. This is before activism, before journalism, before any of this stuff. It started more in this kind of spiritual way where I found myself locked up in a cage, never really been in major trouble, but I knew I probably wasn't going home the next day. It's like, I think I might have fucked up, and I don't know if I can fix this one. And after trying to spend a couple days on the phone with lawyers and girlfriends calling this and mom's doing this, it became clear, like, I'm not getting out. Like, they sentenced me 2 years, felony sentence plus probation, and I had to do at least a year of that. And so I'm looking at the calendar just like, oh my God, like it's becoming real, right? Like, I'm not getting out of here. I can't walk out of these four walls until I'm told. I can't really use the bathroom in privacy anymore. I can't eat really just all these changes. And of course there's a feeling of like overwhelmingness. And the craziest thing is like you want to fight it because of course you're thinking about all your family and friends out here and what we call the free world behind bars. Free-ish maybe. But you know, you're thinking about all your friends and it slows down everything. Like your time starts to slow down and eventually you have to come to a place, which is very difficult to do, but I was able to kind of do it in a way that felt very empowering. You have to let go of everything happening out here and just do your time. And you have to be present with it. And so I was lucky enough to have a very big spiritual influence in my life, my grandmother who's since passed. And when I got locked up, she was sending me books on meditation, specifically Zazen, Zen Buddhism, centering prayer, just different books that I was just soaking in. And I'd never really been open to any of that stuff. In fact, I was very much anti-religious, anti-spiritual, anti-God, any of that kind of thing. And in that space, I just started meditating every day. I started journaling every day and really trying to figure out, like, how the hell did I get in this place? Why am I 20 years old and I'm locked up and all this stuff? And so I went through that crazy journey. I ended up getting out 2008, as I said. And that was really, I think, my first wake-up call. This is 2 years before I later start getting to activism. That happened first, and I think that needed to happen first. So in 2013, after living a double life for a couple years, because I don't know if you've experienced something like this, but when I got out, I had my meditation friends and consciousness groups, and we did all of our things, and then I had my activist friends, and we did protests and we did rallies. But every time I tried to talk to my activist friends, and I'd say, hey guys, there's a meditation this weekend, we're doing some chakra alignment or whatever it was, they're like, what are you talking about, hippie? Like, they just weren't interested. And then I'd come over to my spiritual crowd and we'd be doing our meditation. I'd say, hey guys, this weekend there's a protest happening, there's a police shooting, something real's going on, right? And they're like, don't talk about it, you're gonna manifest it, only good vibes here, no bad vibes here. And so I kind of just like, all right, I have this activist life and I have this spiritual life. But in 2013, I kind of had another one of those nights that maybe some of you've experienced, up till 3 a.m. watching YouTube videos and going down random rabbit holes. And then I just heard this phrase, the conscious resistance, and that has become, the movement, my website and my book series. And for me, the conscious resistance is the recognition that the struggle for a more free, ethical, and just world that I think many of us are after is not only going to come from confronting the physical institutions of power. So like, let's say Monsanto, or, name your least favorite politician, whoever it is, like, right, those are people and they're making bad decisions and they should be confronted and exposed, etc. But there's also that other side, and that's what I said earlier about the internal tyrant, right? And so I think if we only focus on the physical, or the opposite, you only focus on the spiritual and you're just like meditating, floating out there, you're not grounded, you're not rooted. Without the other, I think it becomes this imbalance. So the conscious resistance, my work and my journalism is an exploration of that. Like, how do we build a better world, both physically and spiritually, and kind of bring those messages together? So what I'm going to share today is rooted in both of those aspects, trying to help us exit and build from unhealthy mindsets, we'll talk about that, but also exit from unsustainable, wasteful, and I would say evil systems in some way, and supporting or building new ones. So that's what we're going to focus on for the rest of the time. You guys still with me? Is that making sense? Is that all good? Cool. Like I said earlier, I don't know how much time they gave me, so I'm just going to go till I'm done. I'll be done like 30 minutes, maybe. Good? So when I wrote the book in 2019, we published it in 2020, right before COVID. I'm going to ask a couple of questions because I want to just feel everybody out. Does the term the Great Reset mean anything to anybody? Raise your hand if you know what I'm talking about. A couple of you? Okay, cool.
I don't know enough about it.
Yeah, but yeah, this isn't a test. I'm just curious to like get, okay, does the term Agenda 2030 mean anything to anybody? Whatever your beliefs on it.
I don't know enough about that.
Cool, but you've heard it before, right? What about the term technocracy?
Yeah, I know
Cool. So I'm going to give some definitions for some of these things. The other one, what was I going to say? Great Reset, Technocracy, Agenda 2030. Yeah, I think that's good. We'll start there. So, oh no, another one. COVID 1984.
I heard that one, yeah.
Okay. Does that bring up any feelings? We're going to talk about all this. Okay. Like I said earlier, if anything I say challenges you, you're welcome to leave, but I encourage you to stay and sit with it and see where it goes. So, I wrote this book 6 months before the COVID stuff started, and it has nothing to do with pandemics or anything like that. And I didn't attempt to predict what was coming, but the book definitely did end up describing a lot of what we witnessed in different parts of the world during COVID, which was the use of digital IDs in the form of vaccine passports or immunity passports, lockdowns, debanking of people. I mean, are people aware of that there was a lot of different activists and content creators and journalists who are being debanked by not only their own banks, but by PayPal, things like Patreon and stuff, for talking about the wrong things, for what is labeled sometimes disinformation. And so that happened to me as well. My YouTube channel in October 2020 got deleted because actually Miriam, and this is like, so 6 months into the whole COVID stuff going on, Miriam found this doctor in China who was like doing this intravenous high-dose vitamin C protocol in China, and he was like saying, I'm having great results with helping people who aren't feeling great. So I interviewed him, and YouTube deleted my channel because of that, because they said that did not align with World Health Organization policy to talk about vitamin C treatment during COVID. So nevertheless, like when I use that term, COVID 1984, you know, it's meant to imply like the book 1984. There was some heavy-handed and I would say totalitarian measures used around the world. It wasn't the same everywhere, but if you didn't pay attention then, I encourage you to go back and look at what was happening in places like Australia. Look at what was happening in places like Italy, some parts of the UK. The US did considerably better than a lot of other places where, but there was still in the US people who, let's say they were forced to get a PCR test, and when they were found to be allegedly sick, there was at least one man that I found a story that was required to wear an ankle monitor so they could track him and make sure he didn't go out of his home, and this, all kinds of stuff. And in my view, and in the view of many journalists that I work with, COVID 1984 was a huge advancement of the militarization, the surveillance technology, particularly the private technology. We're not going to focus so much on the problems, but if you're interested in this stuff, this is the kind of articles I write about. I encourage you to look up a company called Palantir, for example, a man named Peter Thiel. I've done a lot of work on him if you want to learn more. But the point is, even in schools, we saw them rolling out the more facial recognition technology. Once they shut down the schools and kids weren't there, they brought it in because they said the facial recognition technology was somehow going to allow them to detect COVID. But guess what? COVID's over and that technology doesn't disappear. Now the agenda has moved forward a little bit, right? And so whatever your thoughts are on it, I believe that that event, again, whatever your theories or thoughts on how, whatever, it was used or taken advantage of at the least to advance this agenda that has been going on for some time. So in June 2020, the World Economic Forum announced this thing they called the Great Reset. And the World Economic Forum hosts this big gathering of billionaires and corporate executives and big tech execs and politicians and media people in Davos, Switzerland every January. And they said in January 2021 we're going to unveil this full Great Reset plan. When this video came out, it had this phrase in it, you will own nothing and be happy. Has anybody heard that phrase? Like some of you may have heard that phrase, right? So it became viral around there, right? And a lot of people were kind of freaking out, like, oh my God, this crazy group of very rich and powerful people are talking about the Great Reset while COVID's going on. Is there some relation? All these theories were popping up, and I believe that they were accurate, that things were advancing, that agenda was advancing. The agenda they were advancing is called Technocracy, and this is partially what my book focuses on. Technocracy, I'll be brief here, is a movement, a historical movement that was originally based in the US and Canada in the 1920s and 30s. And the technocrats, they basically said, democracy isn't working, voters don't know what to vote for, and also the business class isn't good at running society. We need to get rid of the capitalist class, we need to get rid of the voting class, and instead we need to have a technocracy, which would basically be ruled by technologists, scientists, experts, and technological elite. And so they had this, you can look up the Technocracy movement. It was very big in the US and in Canada. In fact, Elon Musk's grandfather was a part of it up in Canada. And so they wanted to remove government, but not to free people or do anything like that, but to replace it with a sort of technocratic bureaucracy. And at that time when they were writing, they said the machines would be used to kind of micromanage society, to allocate resources. We would all have energy credits and things like this. They promoted it as a utopia, but they also were willing to admit it would involve certain levels of loss of individual liberties in order to attain this alleged utopia, which is usually what people selling utopia say. Like, oh, we just got to compromise and change a few things, and I promise on the other side it's this beautiful paradise we're all going to get to. Nevertheless, the movement kind of had its big moment and then sort of faded into history. At least that's what we're told. But actually, this movement is guiding a lot of the very powerful people in our world. If you look up the history of technocracy, look up a book called The Technotronic Era, America Between Two Ages, written by this man named Zbigniew Brzezinski. I'm just dropping a lot of facts. I'm sorry, I'm just kind of stuck in this. We'll get to the solutions in a second. Zbigniew Brzezinski, he was like a deep state agent who advised Jimmy Carter all the way to Obama, every president. This guy wrote a book that talked about the need for a world police state, but we would have technology running everything, and they would promise it would be utopia. You'd have to give up a couple of freedoms and a couple of individual liberties to get there, but we promise it's going to be good for you. My point is, this has been written about, talked about, and now the technocrats of today are people like Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, you could argue Bill Gates and others. These very powerful billionaires who have massive amounts of data on us through their companies are not elected, but clearly wield a lot of power and can impact our world in different ways. So they're sort of the, I'm not saying like they're the be-all, end-all of the top of the pyramid, so to speak, but they're definitely playing a role here. And so what I was saying earlier about my awareness of digital surveillance, as I learned more about facial recognition and all these different tools and how digital IDs, I started studying India's Aadhaar system. Is anybody familiar with it? This is a digital ID system that India, the entire subcontinent of India, went around with the help of funding from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and went around and scanned the retina of every single billion-plus resident. It took them years to do it, but now every single person in India has to use this ID card. I think it's a phone app now called Aadhaar, which means the foundation. And so you can't get a government support from it without it. You can't get any kind of government services or anything, and they get into certain buildings without it. And so for the millions of people who are living in poverty in India, there have already been examples of people, so they need this Aadhaar ID now to go get their welfare check or to get whatever it is they get from the government. And there have been cases where the system has malfunctioned or went down, and people are showing up to like, hey, I'm here to get my aid for today, here's who I am, and they're like, sorry, the system's down, we can't help you. And all kinds of really dystopian elements of this. Like if you're a fan of Black Mirror, a lot of what I'm talking about might be familiar, but reality is actually even more scary. So, but also you can look at China's social credit score system there. Countries like Denmark, they already got digital IDs that are pretty much, you need it to do anything, to ride a bus, to rent a house, to get insurance, to get a car, anything, right? So, and what's the problem with that? You might say, it's like, oh, it's no big deal, Derek. I've already got a smartphone and I'm scanning it everywhere. I scan my face to get into my phone. Again, those are personal choices you're making, but once it gets out of your hands and into a government or a private corporation, there's a very real potential that governments can and will use these things against people who are vocal. You don't even have to be a big outspoken activist like myself. Let's just say you post a meme every now and then, right? The more and more these systems get integrated with a digital ID that contains your healthcare information, your banking information, your social media history, and your location data, because I'm sure you guys all got Google Maps running right now, and every place you've ever been is logged in there. This becomes very valuable, not just to people who are trying to market to you and to sell data to you, but if, let's say, the government did become more tyrannical, whether under the current president or some future president, they have all the data they need to turn this into a completely surveillance state where if you step out of line, we can debank you, well, until you decide you want to join the rest of us and stop saying all those crazy conspiracy theories online. Or, like they've done with Aadhaar and with the Chinese social credit score system, they can penalize you. So the social credit aspect, it's kind of like a credit score. Credit scores, if you don't have a good credit score, you can't rent a house or buy a car, stuff like that. But the social credit score, it's about who you hang out with, right? So let's say her and I are friends, and I'm a well-known disinformation, conspiracy theorist, crazy nut, and so my score is very low. When she hangs out with me, her score goes down. This is how it functions in the Chinese social credit score system. Like, if you affiliate with bad actors, your score can go down as well. It's a way of kind of social engineering compliance, right? Because what might happen after a while is, even though we're good friends, as her score goes down for hanging out with me, she's going to lose access to that new promotion she's been waiting to get, because she needs at least a certain score to get that. So then she might say, I love you, but I'll see you in 6 months because I really need to make sure I get this next vacation, or I get this. That's literally how they start social engineering people to comply. It's not with a gun to your head. It's more subtle, and I think more dystopian when it comes in this technological form, because it's almost invisible. You don't even realize it until you bump up against it and you're like, whoa, I guess I said something wrong. And this is, I'll give another example before we start talking about exit and build. In China, which was extremely locked down during COVID, even way beyond any other country, they had a zero COVID policy. So I mean, people were being welded into their homes. There's all kinds of crazy videos you can find online of people just, nut stuff and super locked down. Eventually people got sick of it. After like 2.5, I think 3 years, they did the whole thing. So activists started organizing, they started pushing back and doing some kind of like, not against, COVID, but against the policy, and saying like, hey, things are fine now. You're just using this as a reason to lock us in our homes at this point. And so the activists start organizing. In China, they have this app called WeChat. Is anybody familiar with it? So WeChat is like the everything in one app, right? It's got all that stuff I was saying, your healthcare information, your banking information, your social media. It's so convenient. And this is one thing I talk about in my book. All of these technological solutions are going to be sold to us under the guise of convenience. It's so easy. Just scan your face when you get to the airport. You don't have to talk to a human. You can just walk right in. Or you might have seen in certain stores, like at the airport, they're rolling out these contactless stores where there's no person in there, right? So you either like scan your hand or scan your face, and then it's convenient. You don't have to talk to a dirty human who might have COVID. Just grab your stuff and then walk out, right? They're going to sell it under convenience. They're going to sell it through video games, and many people are going to jump for joy and rush to it without giving it a second thought. My hope is that you guys will start to evaluate the ways you relate to some of this technology. But these activists started to organize in China, and they were doing it through WeChat because that's their main way. I mean, maybe they were using some anonymous apps, but it's very difficult. They have what's called the Great Firewall of China as well, so people have to try to use VPNs to communicate privately. Nevertheless, it didn't take long for the government in China to find out who was organizing these protests, and when they went to go catch the subway to make it to the protest, guess what? Their digital ID had been turned off, so they couldn't access anything. So they effectively killed that protest because everybody's on this system, and you need this system to get onto the subway, to get into a building. So think about that. Again, you don't have to put a gun to someone's head. You just turn their shit off until they comply, or maybe you penalize them and say, hey, you don't have banking services for a week, because you're spreading disinformation. That is the danger of, if these systems continue to become all pervasive, we could one day, not too far off in the distant future, be living in a world like that. So as I said earlier, I don't really think that there's a way to stop that. Like, there's no one single computer, smash it, and it's not like a Hollywood movie and it's over like that. And I don't even know if that is the answer. Like, I mean, for better or worse, technology's here. There's no erasing it. It's no going backwards. So how do we navigate that, right? I don't think the politicians are going to be capable of saving us from this. Like I said, there's only one law in the U.S., even if you think the law is the right way to go. There's only one state in the entire country that has anything about facial recognition protection. It's in Illinois. No other state has anything. So that means any company, government, police can take your face print, sell it, upload it to databases, do whatever. And maybe you don't care right now, but as I said, as this technology becomes more pervasive, and with our digital record that lives forever on the internet, things that you've done in the past could eventually in the future be used against you, which is a really scary thought as well. Maybe some things you're saying right now aren't very controversial, but at a point in the future they become controversial, and then that could be used against you later. So if you rule out political solutions, I definitely rule out apathy. In my book, I talk about apathy being death, because I essentially believe, like, if you can see, we might all disagree on some of the problems, but I think generally we look at the world and we see things not quite where we would like them to be. We think it could be better at the very least, right? And if you can see that, and you see that there's some bad stuff on the horizon, or at least the potential for some bad stuff, and you choose not to act, I personally believe doing that, choosing inaction, is selling out your ancestors, because no matter what color of skin you have, what language you speak, where you come from on this planet, every single one of our ancestors had to go through blood, sweat, and tears to get us here, whatever country of origin. There was a lot of struggles. So you have all of that with you. You have your ancestors with you, but also we're selling out the future coming 7 generations. The coming generations, those who are not even born yet, your children, grandchildren, and people we'll never meet, are 100% depending on us to do something about the sort of apocalypse on the horizon. And if we choose not to, and we're just like, oh, fuck it, YOLO, I'm just going to hang out at Rise and Vibes and go to festivals and have a good time and ignore this stuff, sooner or later it will be at your doorstep. And at that point, it's going to be even like, if these systems advance, opting out right now is already pretty difficult. Like, I'd say this as somebody who doesn't use a bank account, doesn't have a driver's license, doesn't talk to certain government agencies, and tries to live, as much opting out and out as possible, and still having to make compromises because it's not easy. That is only going to get more and more difficult as these systems get more integrated, right? So my vision is essentially that the more of us who have this conversation and we start focusing on the creation of parallel systems, alternative systems outside of their hands, whether that's economic, education, food production and distribution, again, spiritual, kind of mental systems outside of the ones we're being fed, that is my focus, is how do we build that parallel society, that parallel system, the counter economy, the underground economy outside of their hands, so that as their system advances, because again, I don't know if there's any way of stopping that train. I just know that at the very least, maybe we can get off before the train wreck happens, right? And we can choose a different path. So that's what I'm really focused on. And in the book, I talk about a couple of solutions in this regard. One of them, like I said, not a solution, but one path is apathy is death. Okay, you see there's problems, but because of a lack of motivation, because of fear, because of whatever, you choose not to do anything. You're just like, well, yeah, shit's rough, but I got to take care of my own family, which I understand and totally, get. So I'm just going to take care of my little piece of the world and hope it all goes away. It's not going to work. I don't think that's going to work. Doing nothing is not going to save the coming generations, and it's not going to honor the work that our ancestors have done before us. So I choose this exit and build idea. Exit and build kind of has two components. One of them relates to physical location. So was anybody in a place, and again, this is not a test, it's just I want to hear your thoughts. Was anybody living in a place during any point in COVID 1984 that you felt was like heavily aggressive with policies you didn't agree with? A few hands go up. Did anybody choose to move because of that? That's exit and build. So you're facing a situation, you realize that like, wow, the place I'm living or the people I'm surrounded with do not align with my values and my principles. In fact, this is the complete opposite. Maybe there's a city over, or a town over, or a state over, or a country over that I feel more welcome and I feel like I could, contribute my skills, or at least I'll be left alone, I'll be more free, right? Was that sort of part of your rationale? Did COVID push you to move?
Yeah.
What was it? What was the main drive? Was it mandates of some kind? Mass mandates? Yeah. Couldn't do it. Yeah. Wow. Who else? You had your hand up? Where were you living?
I was in Albuquerque, New Mexico.
Yeah.
It was pre-lockdown, and my roommate was all really enforcing within our own household
Wow.
a lot of rules.
Yeah. Became too much?
I actually started following your work and met some people in Freedom Cell Network.
Awesome. That's a success story right there. Beautiful. We're going to talk about Freedom Cells. Thank you for sharing. What was your name? Mona. And what was your name? Good to meet you. So yeah, that's one component of exit and build. It's simple enough to understand. And it doesn't have to do with COVID. It could just be anything. Like maybe you realize you're just living in an area and there's not the kind, like maybe you're trying to be an activist, you're trying to connect with other people and you just can't meet the like-minded people, the conscious people you're looking for, but you realize 30 minutes away there's the hip and cool town where there's already a scene and you could go join there and maybe contribute your skills or build something new, and you'd rather do that. Some people, we choose this other path that I call hold down the fort. Like maybe you're like, all right, there's nothing going in my community, or it's super aggressive with this policy or that policy, but this is my home and I'm going to, live here and I'm going to die here, so I'm going to build. And that's some people's path. Was that anybody, like holding down the fort, like you're committed to home and you're going to make it better? Yeah, so we all choose different paths. Some of us, it's like, no, I want to go there. Here, Miriam and I, we moved to Mexico, March 2020. We knew we already wanted to, but we moved to Mexico whenever all the insanity began. We have land out there that we just paid off in January, and we're starting to build a community out there. Yeah, so we're living this exit and build idea that I'm sharing here with you. So that's one component, physical location. Easy enough to understand. Where the work gets deeper and more holistic is kind of what I was saying earlier, where you want to take what I call a holistic self-assessment, which, by the way, is another one of my books you can download for free on my website. It's about just like doing this introspection. It's actually the process I took myself through when I was in prison, and just kind of doing this self-assessment of like all these different pieces of your life. And so part of that includes getting to know what are your principles, like what's motivating you, right? For me, I'll tell you the main principle that motivates every action I take, thanks for coming guys, is individual liberty, self-ownership, and also you could say the non-aggression principle. What that means to me is that I'm a powerful, beautiful, sovereign human being, and nobody has a right over my body, my choices, and how I live my life. And I extend that out to everybody else, of course. So if that's true for me, that's also true for him, it's true for him, for her. And so then if we can start out that basic standpoint, that means that it's wrong for me to initiate force, violence against you, to say, live the way I want you to live. Why are you living this way? We can have dialogue, we can have discussions, we can have disagreements, healthy disagreements, but it's wrong for me to try to force you to live the way I want, right? Your life choices are your own, who you love, how you live, right? So if we can establish that basic respect for each other, that's kind of where I do everything I start from. And is the choice I'm going to make going to violate somebody else's self-ownership, right? And for me, I try to extend this to animals as well. So when you start to think about that and just you look at your life, like, okay, I feel like generally, of course, I respect other people's freedoms. But one area people often forget is when it comes to government, because government's sort of a way of outsourcing that violence. So let's just say, like, I have a problem with her because she's a huge pothead and I hate weed, and I just wish people would ban weed, right? And I'm just like, why won't you stop smoking weed, right? But instead of me coming and physically holding her down and taking the joint out of her mouth, I go vote and tell the government to do it. Because that's essentially what it is. It's sort of a muted force. People don't see it the same way. But me going to vote to ban or to say, hey, if you get caught with that joint, we're going to put you in jail, right? I'm not doing the violence. It's the government doing it. It's the cops doing it. But I voted for it, right? So even to that, that's why I said earlier I'm an anarchist, that to me it eliminates government. We can talk more about that later. But that's kind of like my foundational principle, self-ownership. And then there's more, everything that springs from that. But I think that's a big important step in this journey. What are your principles? What are your values? What's guiding you? Some people raised their hand earlier. I'll ask again. Who's familiar with the term Agenda 2030?
What? Say it.
Agenda 2030?
Agenda 2030?
Yeah. A few of you. Who here, because we're in mixed company, so I don't like to make assumptions. Who here thinks it's not a good thing? Okay. Okay, cool. So, and again, we don't need to all be on the same page. I encourage you to learn more. You can check out my my documentaries. I have a 17-part documentary series called The Pyramid of Power, which is all about this if you want to go deep down the rabbit hole. thepyramidofpower.net, thepyramidofpower.net. But nevertheless, if we understand that there is a vision for the year 2030 and beyond that some of us might not agree with, that does involve the technocracy I was talking about, with massive pervasive surveillance, with limitations on individual liberties and privacies, if you see that that's one potential path, and I'm guessing that's not the path most of us here want, then what are we actually doing, though, to choose a different path, right? Because like I said earlier, it's one thing to be on the train and you're like, oh my God, there's a crazy train wreck coming up, but anyways, let me get back to playing video games. I'll just wait for it to happen. At some point, we got to step off. We got to focus on building new systems, parallel paths, right? So Exit and Build takes that idea, you take this as self-assessment, you get to understand your principles, what's guiding you, what's your 2030 vision? My 2030 vision is the land we have with avocado trees, banana trees, free-range kids running around, clean water, teaching people permaculture, cob structures, hempcrete, and we're building it. I can see the vision, I can hold it, and I'm working towards it. I encourage you to have that much understanding. If you're an artist, draw it, write it down. What is your vision? If you don't want their vision of the future, then get to know what it is you want. Because how can you get there if you don't even really know what you're aiming for, right? So that's one important piece. Understanding your principles, understanding where you're aiming for. Then after that, okay, now I understand what I do stand for, and I know what I don't stand for. So you start to look at these different systems. We're going to start with the banking systems, and I'm going to be brief here and just go through these different sections. Like I said, my book's free to download. I have talks that go super deep if you want to get into this. But let's say the banking system. Long ago, I realized that I didn't want to support the banking system because in 2008, they robbed the American people and people around the world. HSBC's been caught with human trafficking. Chase Bank helped Jeffrey Epstein launder money. Bank of America was in, we could just go on and on, right? So why in the fuck would I want to give those people my money? Because it's just what we're all taught? Because it's the mainstream thing to do? It's because that's just normal? I guess, but we don't have to accept that. So taking this exit and build idea, say, okay, that's a system I don't support. I'm currently in it, and that's fine. That's where I'm at now. But my goal is to be as unplugged from that system as possible. One step you could take is look up a local credit union. Look up a smaller bank. So you're still in the banking system. You're still in the mainstream economy. My goal is to be outside of it. But still, you're taking one step away from Jeffrey Epstein banks to, okay, now I'm supporting a local credit union where I have a little bit more say over where my money goes, right? And then maybe if you're interested, you could explore things like Monero and private cryptos or precious metals or barter or gift economy, all kinds of stuff, right? You start seeing that there's other steps you can go. You're exiting from this system that hopefully doesn't align with your values and starting to focus on building new systems or participating in new systems. And each of these we could keep going, but I'm going to just list another one. Food. You mentioned the mask mandates earlier, right? Was that for grocery stores too? Yeah, so during COVID, a lot of people who didn't want to wear masks and felt like it was, their freedom not to do so, myself included, didn't want to continue to participate at these big box grocery stores that are requiring this, right? But there was a lot of, like, for example, Miriam and I, when it started, we got the numbers of our fruit people that we would go to the market to meet them, and we said, look, if they try to lock anything down, if anything happens, we'll meet you. We'll just text you. We'll come physically meet you and buy the fruit from you, so we don't have to go deal with all that, right? So having like a support network can help, but the point is, for many people, that was an eye-opener that maybe I don't want to be dependent on this big box grocery store. Like, I'm not saying you necessarily need to be a farmer, but maybe I do need to get closer to know the farmers and know the people and the growers around me. Personally, when it comes to food, I'm interested in building parallel systems in terms of food production, so having decentralized mass growing everywhere, like, community gardens, urban farms, CSAs, backyard gardens, front yard gardens. Like, we need more local production, and that takes effort, takes energy and time, but I think that's the big solution, as opposed to being completely dependent on this wasteful, just destructive system that most of us operate on. And again, this isn't about like saying you're living wrong or anything. It's about us leveling up and saying, okay, maybe I don't really support that. What can I actually do to try to do that? Okay, there's a farmer's market this weekend. I can go check out what they have there. Oh, look, they have all the produce I love to eat. Hey, what's your name? Where's your farm at? Can I come see it? Can I get your number? Start establishing those relationships, right? Not only are you getting away from the big box corporate stores, but then you're supporting something more local. And essentially, you could say that exit and build is taking this voting with your dollar idea, but applying it to as many areas of your life as possible. Like I said, finance, economy, banking, etc., food production. So maybe you decide to go do a weekend volunteer at a community garden just to learn a little bit more, get your hands in the soil, or support those who are doing that. Technology. This is another big one here. How many awesome people here have like projects or businesses or ideas you're working on right now in the digital space? How many of those are existing on Microsoft or Google software right now? Gmail, Google Docs. Again, this is not like making fun of me. I'm just asking, because this is the norm in our world, right? Can you think of any reasons you wouldn't want to use Google? I got a few we could get into, but I'm sure things come to mind. I'll just name one. So, has anybody heard of Project Maven? This is a few years ago. It was and it actually still exists. It was a AI-based drone targeting program, drone warfare program, and Google was involved in it in 2017, 2018, and then some of the employees started organizing. They actually staged a walkout, and they're like, we don't want to be participating in this. Like, this is giving Google technology to allow the U.S. military to use AI to drone bomb people. So a bunch of employees like staged walkouts, and it made the news for a little bit, and they actually got Google to back out of the project. Of course, Palantir, the company I mentioned earlier, they stepped in, and now they took over, and it continues on. But nevertheless, like, some people had a little bit of spine, and they said, hey, we're not going to just stand here and do that, right? But Google also spies on, we could keep going on, right? But the point is, the big tech companies, Microsoft, Google, a lot of these others, they have practices that I don't think we would generally support. They don't respect your privacy, for one, is a big one. Every time you're downloading an app or doing something like that, you're giving them permission to your text messages, to your microphone, and they can remotely turn those things on. Doesn't mean they're listening to you 24/7. Some of it, again, is more innocuous. It's about selling you ads and stuff like that. But still, nevertheless, these companies don't respect what I consider to be a part of your sovereignty, your privacy. You have that. Nobody should know anything unless you want to communicate it to them, right? So we understand the problems in the big tech area. How would we exit and build from there? They have a monopoly. I mean, you can't go to the local electronics store and find anything other than Apple, Google, Amazon, all the big companies. But there are options. There's, Linux. Linux is an alternative operating system. It takes a little bit of effort to figure it out, but it's completely doable. A website I want to encourage you guys to check out, because I know the technology piece can be a little difficult for some of us, takebackourtech.org. This is a buddy of mine. He runs this website, and he's got real simple guides, videos and written guides on how to switch to Linux, how to get off Google Drive, different things like that. And he actually also has a company called Above. They sell privacy-based phones, like Miriam's phone is the Above phone, and it's basically a de-Googled phone that's loaded with alternatives to everything that you're used to. So, for example, we've been traveling on tour. There's the phone right there. We've been traveling on tour the last week, and we use a map called Magic Earth. Magic Earth is an open source map that's not Google, not Microsoft, and doesn't track your data, but And it's you know, these open source projects at first they kind of start out a little shaky, but it's gotten so much better. We've just been remarking as we've been on the road. Like we search for Tico time, it finds it on the map. You know, before it was like you have to kind of put in the address. But my point is, there's alternatives to everything you're doing. Another example: who here listens to podcasts? Who's paying for podcast services? Hopefully not too many of us. Okay, if you are, like. Oh, yeah, that's not bad. All right. Well, the reason I mention that is so one of the apps, just to give an example, that she has on the phone is called AntennaPod. And so she doesn't have to have a Spotify account, Apple account, or any of those things. She can just search her favorite podcast. It subscribes to it. You can download it instead of having to stream it. Because that's a whole other thing, and I won't go off on a tangent, but this idea that we should all become accustomed to and used to subscription-based services. So don't own physical media anymore, whether that's a DVD or a VHS or a CD. Just all trust that Amazon's always going to have it there for you. Netflix is always going to have it there for you. I download so much movies, so much music using the Pirate Bay and other sources because I'm not going to pay them, but also even if you just...
Since 2012, the Conscious Resistance Network has been an independent media organization focused on empowering individuals through education, philosophy, health, and community organizing. We work to create a world where corporate and state power do not rule over the lives of free human beings. Our motto is leading by example and helping others in their pursuit of freedom. Visit theconsciousresistance.com to find our articles, documentaries, interviews, podcasts, books, and more. Remember, you are powerful, you are beautiful, and you are free.